Darth Sidious is almost synonymous with the dark side and the Sith. But what if Palpatine was found by the Jedi Order at a young age? The Separatist Wars has been raging on for 10 years now, led by Darth Plagueis and Count Dooku. Instead of clones, the Republic is forced to conscript its citizens to fight in the war. The Republic is steadily losing ground, while the Jedi Order grows disillusioned by the war. Anakin briskly walked into Padmé's cozy apartment. He embraced his children, Jinn and Leia. He hadn't seen them in forever. His duties and the Jedi had prevented that. Shortly after, he entered Padmé's quarters and he saw her teeming with excitement. Not only had she looked happy, he could have sensed her joy from a mile away. He inquired about her obvious excitement. She was pregnant. Anakin was filled with delight. Though he knew this moment wouldn't last, he wanted to cherish it. But while he was undeniably glad, he knew what he had to do for his family. He'd barely been able to see the twins since their birth 6 years ago. It was time for him to be a proper father to his kids. He had to come clean with the Jedi Council. The Jedi Council convened, but Jedi Master Palpatine noticed Skywalker was missing. Though Anakin had never been known for his punctuality, he would never miss a vote like this for no reason. The vote continued without him as planned, and it was decided. The Jedi were to withdraw from the war against the Separatists. Palpatine slammed his chair and stood up, telling the Jedi Council about how irresponsible it was to leave the war. He talked about the millions of Republic soldiers that they were abandoning. While he did believe the Jedi should stay in the war and beat back the Separatists, he wondered if he really did care for the civilians and the soldiers left behind, or had he convinced himself that he was doing it for good. As Palpatine continued his speech against the Council's decision, Anakin entered the Council chambers. Palpatine abruptly stopped and sat down to welcome him. "I need to confess," he announced. The Jedi listened on as he described his relationship with Padmé and how he had a family. Most of the Jedi looked at him with disappointment, and some even with disgust. However, Palpatine had known about his relationship and remained unfazed. After Anakin finished his confession, Windu called for a motion to expel him and ban Anakin from the Jedi Order. Anakin looked at Windu with a surprised look. Clearly, he had expected more sympathy from the Council. Sympathy that he would not receive. The Jedi voted on his expulsion. Every single master in the Council had voted to expel him, except him and Skywalker's former master, Kenobi. The Order Anakin had served and sacrificed everything for had casted him aside. After the Council's vote, Palpatine began consolidating his contacts among the Jedi Order and the Senate. He called up old allies to ensure they would support him in his endeavors. He contacted prominent Jedi Masters to ask for their support against the Council. Prominent Jedi like Quinlan Vos and many others promised their support when the time comes. There was no room for negotiations with the Separatists. The Jedi Council and the Senate had betrayed the Republic. Anakin was in his quarters, patching up his armor, when he got an unusual call from the head of Padmé's security detail. He answered it, and he got the news. Padmé was dead. Complications from her pregnancy caused her death. He curled his fists with rage, and everything in his vicinity began floating. Rage built up in him like molten lava ready to burst, and in a split second, he tore his armor into shattered pieces. Everything from his bedsheets to his computing devices were ripped and torn into shreds. His comms began to light up. It was Master Palpatine. Palpatine stood there, consoling Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi was in great pain, and he could sense it. Though emotion was against the Jedi code, Palpatine had seen uses for it that the Jedi would consider to be unnatural. Though he felt some sorrow for Anakin, he sought to use his pain and direct it to a greater cause. The same institutions that abandoned Anakin had abandoned the Republic and what it stood for. It was time to win back the glory of the Republic. Palpatine and Anakin walked side by side as a dozen Jedi Knights marched rank and file behind them. The night sky gleamed on them as a few guards began to notice them. "Sir, you aren't authorized to be here," a Senate guard warned them, as the rest of the guards began pointing their rifles at the rogue Jedi. He quickly glanced at Anakin, permitting him to dispatch the unknowing guards. Anakin lifted his right hand and the lead guard began to lift in the air, grasping for his breath. The other guards looked on with horror, but before they could fire their blasters, Anakin force-pushed the choking Senate guard into the remaining guards. They continued their march into the building, and no guard was able to challenge them. Every single one was taken down. Then they reached the Senate floor, where a vigorous debate regarding surrendering to the Separatists was raging. At first, nobody noticed the Jedi Knights encircling the Senate pods, until the exits were abruptly shut, and Palpatine along with Anakin made their way to Chancellor Valarum's pod.
The Senate and the Jedi Council has abandoned the people of the Republic for far too long. We will never surrender to the Separatist powers. In the name of the Galactic Republic, you are under arrest, Chancellor Valor.
Palpatine declared, as the Allied interventionist senators cheered in support of Palpatine, while the pacifists could do nothing. Count Dooku entered the darkly lit room his master often dwelled in. When he neared him, he bent down to his knees and began to speak.
The Republic is in disarray. Coruscant is struck with civil war, and Republic forces are left paralyzed by disorganization.
It is time to attack.
Darth Plagueis announced.